Welcome to the Solid.Food.Buffet. This episode is called No Crucifixion, No Resurrection. Today's Daily Bread is going to start with the question, and that is, was Jesus Christ really crucified? It is said that Christianity stands or falls on the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. These two events form the very basis of Christianity. I want you to put aside what you heard about the crucifixion and let's examine what the Bible says about this. The Apostle Paul says this about Jesus in 1 Corinthians 15 verse 14. And if Christ be not risen, then is our preaching in vain, and your faith is also vain. In this verse, Paul is giving us something to think about, and that is, if Jesus Christ was not resurrected, then that could only mean that he never died. And if Jesus Christ never died, then it is also possible that he was never crucified in the first place. What you're about to encounter here, at the Solid Food Buffet, is going to challenge and potentially redefine your perception of truth. It is going to profoundly reshape the very foundations of your understanding of the Bible stories. Every belief, every piece of knowledge you hold dear will be scrutinized, questioned, and potentially transformed. As we delve into these profound questions and ideas, a veil will be lifted from your eyes, illuminating truths previously hidden from us. These truths are now being revealed as prophesied in the Bible. In Revelations 10 verse 7 it says, "When the seventh angel appears and begins to sound, the mystery of God shall be finished." We are now going to present to you hidden biblical evidence indicating that someone was crucified on that day. But the person on the cross was not Jesus Christ. Here's some strong circumstantial biblical evidence and clues about the crucifixion of Jesus Christ that will make you think about what you thought you knew. The first biblical clue that it was someone else on the cross is this. In the Bible, the Apostle Thomas has two nicknames. One is the Doubting Thomas, the other is Thomas Didymus. Only 3 verses in the Bible mention the word Didymus. John 11:16 says this about Thomas. Then said Thomas, which is called Didymus, unto his fellow disciples. John 21 verse 2 says this, together were Simon Peter and Thomas called Didymus. We all know why Thomas is nicknamed the Doubting Thomas, but the question is, why is he also called Didymus? And what does the word Didymus mean? The word Didymus is a Greek word, and this word means twin. Surprisingly, the word Didymus also means twin in Hebrew and Aramaic. Now the second clue is something to really think about, and that is, if the Bible was translated from Greek to English, then why was the word Didymus not translated? Did the translators make a mistake, or was it done intentionally? Could it be that they were hiding the fact that Thomas was someone's twin? And if he was a twin, whose twin was he? Now this third clue is going to shock and amaze you because it confirms that all this might be true. The third clue is the famous painting of the Last Supper. If you look closely, you will notice that the faces of all the disciples are very different from each other, except for one. Look at the person on his left. He sure looks a lot like Jesus. Wouldn't you agree? Now ask yourself, why did Leonardo da Vinci do that? What was his motivation? Was he trying to send a hidden message in plain sight for those seeking truth? The more you look at this, the more you realize that it could be true that Jesus and Thomas were twins, and it was Thomas on the cross and not Jesus. Think about this for a moment. When the soldiers went to arrest Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, they did not know what Jesus looked like, which is why they needed Judas to point him out with the infamous kiss. Matthew 26:48 says, at that point, Judas gave Jesus a kiss as a prearranged sign for the soldiers who accompanied him. Notice that even though Judas identified him, they still weren't sure. John 18:7 says Jesus asked the soldiers, "Whom do you seek?" And they said, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus answered, "I told you that I am he." Having been identified, the officers arrested Jesus. The premise here is that it was Thomas the twin who the soldiers arrested and was later put on the cross, and not Jesus. If this is so, then it could change everything we thought we knew about the crucifixion. I want you to think about this for a moment, because this could be the reason why Thomas was not present when the resurrected Jesus appeared to the disciples for the first time. John chapter 20 verse 24 says this, "But Thomas, one of the 12, called Didymus, was not with them when Jesus came." You have to ask yourself, where was he? And why was he not there? Could the reason be that he was in the tomb recuperating from his injuries on the cross? Could this be the reason why Mary Magdalene went to the tomb on the third day with spices composed of fragments of wood pounded into a dust called aloe? For thousands of years, aloe vera has been used in treating wounds. So the question is, why was Mary Magdalene going to a stinking tomb 3 days after he was buried with healing ointments like aloe and spices? Who would do such a thing? Especially when the smell of death is one of the most unbearable on earth. It could not be to anoint the body of Jesus, because Jesus was wrapped with 100 pounds of spices just 2 days earlier. If you think about this intelligently using reason, it looks like she went to the tomb to heal someone, and that someone seems to be Thomas Didymus. When you have taken the time to analyze the information given to us in the Bible, you notice that things don't add up, and that these stories don't make sense literally. Only when you understand the next level of interpretation does any of this make sense. For hundreds of years, scholars have agreed that the Bible has been used and abused to the point that the literal story of Jesus Christ no longer satisfies. There are too many indiscrepancies for the average person to just ignore and accept as literal truth. Another reason why the person on the cross could not be Jesus is because the only sign Jesus gave was the sign of Jonah. He said, "Just like Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights, so shall the Son of Man be in the belly of the beast." Now, there are 2 problems with this particular prophecy. The first is, Jesus was only in the tomb for 2 nights and 1 day, not 3 days and 3 nights. The other problem is that Jonah was alive when he entered the fish. Jesus, on the other hand, was dead when he entered the tomb, and that is a problem that is hard to swallow, no pun intended. As for dying on the cross, even that looks suspicious. It doesn't make sense either. The scriptures say that Jesus died in 3 hours. Even Pilate marveled as if he were dead already. Also, dead people do not bleed, especially profoundly like the scriptures say. And for those who claim that Jesus is God, how can a God die by his own creation? The Bible clearly states in 1 Timothy 6:15, God alone is immortal, which means he cannot die. How can you reconcile the fact that Jesus died on the cross if the Bible says God is immortal? This crucifixion story in the Bible seems more like a crucifixion when you use reason and think for yourself. Only when you acknowledge and accept the 3 levels of interpretation given to us in the Bible, called the milk, the solid food, and the strong meat, will you be able to understand the hidden meanings in the Bible and realize that the crucifixion story is not to be understood literally. It only makes sense spiritually, and that is what the Bible calls solid food. The Bible is symbolic in nature, a spiritual book, not a literal history book. Once you understand this, the Bible becomes alive. This is Paul speaking spiritually, not literally. In Romans 8:13, Paul is teaching us that the flesh is to be crucified like Jesus. 1 Corinthians 15:31 says he dies daily. Obviously, he didn't mean that literally. He also says this, I have been crucified with Christ. It's no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. You see, it is all symbolic in nature. He obviously wasn't crucified with Christ, nor does he die every day. Everything is symbolic in nature when it comes to the Bible. You read it literally, but the interpretation is spiritual, not literal. The truth is that just like Paul, we all can be crucified like Jesus because it is not a literal event. It is a spiritual thing that happens in your head. It is a transformation that happens in your mind. Think about this. Luke 23 verse 33 says that the crucifixion took place on Mount Calvary. The word Calvary is from the Latin word calvaria, which means skull. Stedman's Medical Dictionary defines the word calvaria as follows: the upper dome-like portion of the human skull. One more thing, another name for the place where the crucifixion occurs is called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. Interesting, isn't it? One more thing to think about is that they say that God so loved the world that he sacrificed his only son on the cross, and that Jesus sacrificed his life for us. Now that's deep until you really think about it. If Jesus rose from the dead, then what was his sacrifice? The meaning of the word sacrifice is to suffer loss of something, give up or renounce something, also to injure or destroy. Now what did God lose and what did Jesus give up for us? For us, mere mortals, losing a loved one is heartbreaking, but for them it seems like they still have each other, so nothing was lost. The Bible says Jesus is doing fine in heaven, sitting on the right side of the throne. Remember, Jesus himself said that he was going to die and rise on the third day. Once again, what did he sacrifice? We conclude this video with this saying: you can lead people to wisdom, but you cannot make them think. Thank you for watching. Subscribe and stay tuned. Also, think about these things. We dare you. Visit us on YouTube at Solid.Food.Buffet for more compelling videos. For debates, contact us at lookinsideyou1@gmail.com.